Hello, everyone. Today, it is time to talk about Acts chapter 17. As we are going deeper into the book of Acts, we are not just knowing the book of Acts in theory, but I hope that your heart would also get closer to the Lord Jesus Christ. And also, I hope that your heart would get closer to the witnessing. Read from verse 1, chapter 17, from verse 1. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, and they came to Thessalonica, where there was the synagogue of the Jews. And Paul as his manner was went into unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures, opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I have preached unto you is Christ. And some of them believed and concerted with Paul and Silas, and some of the devout Greeks, a great multitude, and of the chief women not a few. But the Jews which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellow of the Baser sort, and gathered the company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring them out of the people. And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, saying, crying, These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also, whom Jason hath received, and these all to contrary to the decrees of the Caesar, saying that there is another king, one Jesus. And they troubled the people and the rulers of the city when they had heard these things, and when they had taken security of Jason and of the other, they let them go. In the book of Acts, wherever they go, they preach the gospel. Especially Paul, he goes to the synagogue of the Jews, because during every Sabbath, the Jews they get together in the synagogue, and the place where they get together is called synagogue. The place of worship, it's not called temple; it's called synagogue. People are ignorant. They say that the place of worship is temple, but that's how people think. Many people think so, but that's not true. Temple is the place where God dwells, and the original one is in heaven, and a sample of it was made in Jerusalem, and that's the only temple. Other than that, a chapel is not a temple. If someone calls a chapel temple, then they don't know the Bible. So Jews they distinguish temple from synagogues. So synagogues in our term would be a church, a place where we have worship, a place of worship, and a temple, on the other hand, when God sent Moses on the mountain Sinai, Moses saw the temple which is in heaven, and he made the exact same thing on the earth. Back then, Israelites they were living in the wilderness. They couldn't live in the permanent building, and they couldn't build a permanent building. So they had to make the temple in the form of tents. That's why they called it tabernacle. And tabernacle is not that. The synagogue is not a tabernacle, but this chapel is a synagogue. So you have to know that synagogue is not a temple. God can never dwell in the synagogue. God doesn't want to keep 2 temples. God wants to keep just one and only temple, and the original one is only in heaven. So when the Jews preach the gospel, wherever they go, the Jews they got together, and the place where the Jews got together, and it's called synagogue. On the day of Sabbath, they would talk about the Bible. They would talk about the Scripture. So you should know that it's not a temple, but it's a synagogue. Now people would notice exactly, and they would call a temple synagogue, but that's not true. The synagogue is not a temple, and chapel is not a temple. There's one and only temple which is made with hands of men. That's in heaven. There's one built with hands of God, and there's one also built after the image of the real original temple in heaven. That's the one in original. And because Jerusalem was conquered, So today the Jewish temple was demolished, and now where the temple of Jews used to be, they built this temple of Muslims. So
산이죠. 그 산에 있는 데고 그 다음에 이제 그 예배를 드리는 곳은 항상 회당이.
and the place of worship is called synagogue.
어느 나라 가든지 간에 그들끼리 모이는 회당을 만들어 가지고 있습니다.
So wherever they go, the Jews they used to have this place of worship, the synagogue. So naturally they got together there, and they shared the word there.
군대 있을 때
When I was in the army, what was good about it was that
훈련소에 제가 훈련을 받는
when I was in a training camp for the training,
개막식 할 때 목사님이 나오더니
when the training opened, new season began, the pastors came and said, "May God bless you." They will say this and they will end. And since then, I never saw the chaplain.
날 예배당에 가면은 군인
So if you go to chapel on Sunday, you will see.
오늘도 군복 없을 거다.
You know, I knew that today too the chaplain would not be around. So there were the soldiers who were in charge, the Christian soldiers.
을 가지고 설교하는
There were also religious soldier, and actually the religious soldiers
훈련소에 있을 때
in the army, their duty was religion. And when you go there, actually for them, preaching is very hard and it's very harsh work for them. So if the worship begins at 9:30,
예배 시작하고도 계속 찬송을
and once the worship begins for 10 and 20 minutes, they will sing more. They will sing for 10, 20 minutes more than they expected. And the religious soldier will come up to the podium and say, "Oh, today pastor is invited by the civilian church, so today we are not really good at preaching, and we are not good at it. So among you, if there's any pastor who used to work as a pastor, you can freely come to the front and you can preach for us." And I was the first one to jump up to the stage and preach.
제가 통신훈련소는
When I went to the military, I was so happy to be able to lead the worship because in other churches, in other bases, they were chaplain. So usually there was religious soldiers, one or two religious soldiers, but they didn't have depth of the Bible, so they didn't have much to talk about. So for them, preaching was so hard and difficult for them. And even now, there are places where they sell the script of the sermons. There are many churches who do that like that.
이제 딱그 바울과 신라 갔는데
So they went. Paul and Silas went to a synagogue.
데살로니가 유대인이 회당에 가니까 그
So when he went to Thessalonica, synagogue in Thessalonica,
시기를 그 유대인이 회당에 있는지라 바울이 자기 길에 돌아서 저희에게 돌아왔다.
and they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews, and Paul, as his manner was, went into unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures, opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that the Jesus whom I preach unto you is Christ. So he began to preach the gospel there.
유대인의 회당에는
Back then, in the Jewish temple, synagogue,
하나님의 아들을 인정하지
they didn't recognize Jesus as the Son of God. And even now, the Jews, they don't recognize Jesus as the Son of God. So even now,
시아가 오길 기다려.
they're waiting for the Messiah, promised Messiah to come.
그대로 했는데도
Although Jesus died just exactly the way it was prophesied,
싫어하고 자기
but Jews, they didn't like the true gospel, but they're still having this worship in the manner of the Old Testament.
유대인들이 가서 말씀이 너무 좋은데
So in the Old Testament like that, they were preaching the word.
이제 뭘 합니까?
But what did Paul do?
그 예언한 예수가 오시는 예언한 한 얼마 또 이야기를 하고 그 예언대로 예수님이
As he was testified,
그 이야기를 하는
they said Jesus is the Christ, they said.
맞는 거예요.
So it was true. It was so correct.
필립이
Philip,
그 사마리아의 복음을 전하는데 하나님
when he preached the gospel in Samaria,
사람 내려가는 길까지 가라갔잖아요.
he was on his way.
내려가는 길까지 갔어요.
He went to the way
그 누굴 만납니까?
all the way down to Casa, and on his way down, he met Ethiopian eunuch.
예루살렘에서 예배드려 이디오피아에서 예루살렘까지 오는데
And for him to come to Jerusalem to Ethiopia was very far.
한 달은 왔다 갔다
It must have taken him like 1 month to come back and forth. Even nowadays, even if you take a train, it's not a short distance to travel.
제사하는 마다
And especially he was in charge of all the possessions of the queen, but he was still that busy, but he still came there while riding the carriage. So he read the Bible in the carriage, which was running on the bumpy road. And back then they were reading the Bible in the written in the parchment. And it was very heavy. But Philip ran along with the chariot, and said, "Oh, do you understand what you read?" Then he looked at him and said, but he could not understand what he was reading. So he told Philip. He felt kind of stuffy because he couldn't understand. He said, "There's no one instructing me. How can I understand it?" The Ethiopian eunuch said. So he told him to get on the chariot. So he got on the chariot. So Philip got on the chariot. So the one that the prophet talks about here is, who is he talking about? It was the word in Isaiah chapter 53. He was reading through Isaiah chapter 53. So it was so good for him to preach the gospel, right? The one that is prophesied by Isaiah is Jesus who died on the cross and was resurrected after 3 days. Did you see the news? It was back then they couldn't see television, so that's when the eunuch was saved. So Jews, they were waiting for Messiah to come, but in reality, when the Messiah came, as he prophesied in Isaiah, he was bruised for our wounded, and he was bruised for our iniquities. He was wounded for our transgressions. His chastisement of our peace was upon him. So as Isaiah testified, Jesus came. So Isaiah, the prophecy made by prophet Isaiah about Jesus was accomplished as it is. But people whose eyes were covered by Satan back then, because their reputation could be damaged by Jesus, so they didn't accept Jesus. Just like Ethiopian eunuch receiving salvation then, just like that, Paul and Silas, they went to Thessalonica and they went to the synagogue of the Jews, and they talked about the Old Testament, and they told him this is how Jesus was crucified on the cross. And when they talked about that, then people, they got saved. But as this happened, let's read from verse 4. And some of them believed and consorted with Paul and Silas, and of the devout Greeks a great multitude, and of the chief women not a few. So it says, and of the devout Greeks a great multitude, and of the chief women not a few. So these people, they accepted and they got saved. But when this happens, each time there are people who follows by. Who are those? So here it says a marketplace. And the Jews which believed and not moved with envy took unto them a certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered the company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring them out to the people. So verse 6. And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, "These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also." So this is how the persecution begins. So this is the official course, actually. As we preach the gospel, there are people who don't know the gospel at all, but still there are people who are speaking against us. But in reality, many pastors, they hear our sermons and they accept it in our heart. Oh, this is true. On YouTube's,
보고 또 변하고 특히 이번에
there are people who change.
때도
And when we do the
많은
CLF,
분들이 와서 보고 이제 그러면서
many pastors they change too.
이단이라는 소리가 점점
And actually, the people there are less people now saying that
식으로 하는 거예요.
we are called.
그 초대 교회 당시에
So now in the days of the early church, people were living spiritual life of the Old Testament.
제사 이런 것들 전부 다
Like in the Old Testament, they were having worship, they're worshiping, and actually Jesus was a
사람들이 이제
shadow of things to come.
구원받는 역사에
But believing in Jesus, they were able to experience this great work, and no matter what the generation, this always happened.
사실은 믿음으로
But as they believed in Jesus, there are people who accepted it in their hearts.
항상 우리 복음은 이단이라는 소리 듣고 남들 의심여긴다 하고
And as they preached the gospel, they were always
최근에
persecuted, and
저희들 교회를 가지고 막 이단을 그런 사람들이 있었는데
there are people in Korea too who called us cult. But what is amazing is
다 우리
many people, many Christians around the world,
우리한테 배우려고
they want to learn from us,
이제 좀 관심을 가지고 요즘은 이제
and they're trying to know how we do. And there are people who say now that we are not called. They say that there are people who say that this is true. So we can see how people there are joining this gospel. And in order to stop this gospel from coming in,
사단이 사람들 막 충동시켜 가지고
Satan was trying to uproar people, and they're trying to tempt us. In Busan, there was some sister. After salvation, they began to come to our worship. And actually, when they came for our worship, they said, the sister came to our church, and her elder sister said, "Oh, that's a cult. You shouldn't go there." Then the younger sister said, "Sister, I don't know much about this church, but I like this church so much. Well, what is it cult about? What do you mean it's cult? I don't know actually." Most people they just say that. They just say that it's cult without actually knowing how this church is like, how church is like.
자기와 다르고 그러니까 막 그런 이야기들 많이 하는데 저도 이제 이단이라는 소리를 참 많이 들었습니다.
So myself too heard many times that our church is called, but they can't prove. They can't actually really prove it why we are called. They're just saying that vaguely. They should have confirmed it. They say that we don't pray, but I don't see any other church which prays as much as we do.
많이 하는데
We have prayer times a lot these days, but they say that we are not having prayer time.
그런 핍박이 있는데
So this kind of things happens always.
중요하냐면
But what is important is,
우리가 하나님의 말씀을 듣고
as we hear the word of God,
안 하면
and if we have no problems at all, people they would they would live fleshly life.
저희들 교회가
In our church,
예배당을 짓고 난 뒤에
as we started building our church,
끝났을 때 염려했어요.
I was a little worried in my heart.
어려운 일도 없고 기도해야 할 많은 일도 없고
If you have nothing to pray for, if everything is peaceful, everything is good, it seems like we'll be good. But if that happens like that, I want to go fleshly as fast as possible. Spiritual life is about overcoming the persecutions and overcoming our enemies and
하나님께서
going for God. But because God loves us so much, we're able to overcome all this, and this is amazing.
근데 이런 핍박을 있을 때
When there is a persecution like this,
잘하고 간절한 마음을 주님을 섬겨 그러는데
and that's when our heart would be sincere and look upon God. But without the persecution,
대부분 육으로 흘러고
most people their heart would flow fleshly, and their heart would flow humanistically.
그래서 하나님께서 진짜 우리 교회 좋은 교회인데
So our church is such a nice and good church.
요즘 뭐 한국의 큰 교회도 보면 전부 다 물질 문제 있고 싸우고 그러는데
But these days, wherever you go, whatever you see, there are many problems in churches these days. But our church is so peaceful. It's very gospel-like.
사단이 역사해 가지고
It's very
대적하는
biblical.
거짓말하는 사람도 있고 막
It's true there are still people who are against us, who are speaking against us. It always happened in the Bible. But God,
지키시고 도우시며 일하시는 게 너무 아름다운 거예요.
you can see how God is protecting us and helping
그러니까
us.
여러분 우리는 인간이기 때문에
Because we are human.
조금만 편하면
When things are comfortable,
그게 아니죠. 더 편하고 싶고
we want something more, even more comfortable, right?
두면 종 두고 싶다고.
Yeah, there is a saying in the old saying. There's a saying that if we have no,
근데 말이 있으니까
if we have a ship, if we have a horse, then we have want to have a servant.
도 치워야 하고 말 목욕도 시켜야 하고 말 죽도 끓여 먹어야 하는데
Because if you want to grow, if you want to have a horse, then you need to feed it, and you want to take care of it. So, it's good to have a horse, but you have to take care of it. You have no time to prepare the porch for the horse. You have to do this and that for the horse. So there are all this stuff that you have to do for the horse.
말 두면 종 두고 싶다는 그런 말.
So there's an expression saying if you have a horse,
만족하는 게 아니고
instead of
싶고
just being satisfied about it, there are people who want more.
더 편하고 더 편하고 더 편하고
As you see something more easier and better, more comfortable, their heart would fall into fleshly way.
네로는
So Caesar in Rome, he called Christians and made
살아있는 사람을 섭으로
a human candle.
가지고
They made people alive.
저녁에 등불을 만들었다.
Yeah, and I heard that they made.
항상 인초로 사는
So people in Rome back then, the Caesar Nero, he lighted people's body and they made human candle. There are stories like that.
네로 당시에
In those days, many Christians that were persecuted.
그때 로마 시민의 3분의 1이
Then 1/3 of Roman citizens were Christians. Then,
3분의 1이 기독교인데 얼마예요?
if 1/3 of Koreans, if they're Christians, that's a big number, right?
핍박 가운데 그들이 하나님만 의지하니까
But when they're relying on God
이야기 나오는
in the persecution, there's a story of catacomb.
이를 이제 그 싹
The whole
땅을 파가지고 굴을
in order to make Roman city, they had to dug underground
너무
and make the city. But the city, the tunnels were so deep and
못 찾아 나온다.
big, so they couldn't come out of it.
가면 안 되고 안 되잖아.
They shouldn't come out of it by themselves, but they needed a guide. So as Christians,
그들이 살았다.
they lived in,
피할 수 있는 거기는 군인들도 돌아오면 길을 못 찾기 때문에
because even the soldiers, if they get in there, they couldn't find them. So the Christians, they lived there back in those days. So only Christians, they knew the way then,
말씀을 듣고 교제하고
and they had testimony, they testified, and they had a fellowship there.
깊이는 안 들어가 보고
I didn't go there that day, but I went there. I went to the point only where there was the guide. Is Pastor Park out yet? If we stay there for 1-2 days, we'll just starve to death there because they cannot find their way out there.
군인들만 그 길을 안다고
But only Christians, they knew the way.
어려움을 겪었는데
So that's how the Christians, they went through difficulties.
고난 없이
So without difficulties, Christians,
얼마나 좋겠습니까?
if we could preach the gospel without any problems, how easy, how nice that would be. But when things are easier, people, they wanna.
저는 제가 이런 얘기하면 안 되는데
And I shouldn't be talking about this, but
많이 먹는 편이에요.
I tend to eat a lot
나이가 들면 자제력이 자기가 밥을
because when I grow old, it's not easy to control or have self-control. So from yesterday, decided not to have breakfast. After starving, after fasting my breakfast, yesterday I went to Cheonju, and as I had my first meal, which was lunch, I ate it to the point that I was so full. And afterwards, I went to Gangneung, and they served me good dinners. This morning too, I fasted the breakfast.
저는 나이 드니까 옛날에 자제력이
I skipped the breakfast. So as I grew old,
먹는데 한참
I want to control my meal diet, but things are so nice.
그렇게 맛있고 좋아.
So food is so delicious.
사실 요즘 우리가 먹는 음식 옛날에 상상
Actually, the food that we are having nowadays, these are things that we could never imagine before. It's a rice. We have good, side dishes.
제 차를
You know,
구원을 받았는데
one of our his brother in our church, he he crashed. He bumped into my car, so he got saved. And they prepared food for me, and this is so tasty.
그러는데
And
하여튼 하나님께서 건강한 몸을 주셔서 감사한
I'm so thankful because God gave us good food.
하는 자체라는 게 그렇게 쉽지 않습니다. 돈이 없어서
Actually, it's not easy.
돈 두고 굶기 정말 어렵고
Having money if you want to starve, it's not easy.
저는 제일 잘못한 금식인데 또 옛날에는
But what is difficult is that a long time ago I wanted to fast,
금식할 틈도 없이
and nowadays I'm so busy that I don't even have time to fast.
며칠하고 말고 그러는데
So if I fast, I fast just for a couple days. So if we fast,
좋고 몸도 굉장히 가뿐.
that's so nice.
다행히 하나님께 건강한 몸을 주셔 지금
But because God gave us good body, so now we've been
저도 이제 많이
until now I was able to
가까이 더 말씀을 전하게 하는지 모르지만 아직까지 형제자매들 날로 강대 올라가지 말아서
I was able to keep on preaching. But even now, they let me stay on the podium, so I stay in the podium. But if I grow older, they will be like, "Oh, Pastor, you can skip the sermon today. We can go up there tomorrow, maybe."
주님을 섬기면서
If they tells me things like that,
어려울 때
whenever there was difficulties like this,
학곡동 살때 군대 있을 때 대우 갔을 때 참 가난하고
when there was in Apgokdong and Kimcheon, we used to starve. We went through a lot of difficulties, but each time
어디서 얻을 수 없는 기쁨과
in my heart there was this joy and happiness that I could not gain elsewhere in the world.
학곡동 살았을 때
Back then, when I was living in Apgokdong,
장팔리 살았을 때 김천 살았을 때
when I lived in Kimcheon,
감사.
I was so thankful.
김천에 처음 가서 얼마 안 됐는데
When I went to Kimcheon,
어느 우리 사무실 앞에 아가씨가 둘이 와 있어요.
there was this two ladies who came to my office. I wanted to go. I wanted to go out. It was someone else,
계속 거기
but they were waiting for me. They were waiting for someone there. They were not going anywhere.
아 여기
So I went out.
왔느냐고
So what brought you here?
말씀을 듣고 싶어.
We came here to hear the word.
선산에서
From Sunsan, they came.
아가씨 한 24kg 떨려.
It was about
16살 먹은 아가씨 여기
24 kilometers from Sunsan, and was a 18-year-old girl and 16-year-old girl. And all afternoon long, I preached the gospel to them. I told them to go back home, but they didn't go back.
부모님도 걱정하시.
Your parents would be worried about you.
여기 있으려고
Then they said they made up their heart to stay here. That's why they came, and they received the permission from their parent. They said,
결심을 하나
and they asked me to rent a room for them.
거기서 있었는데
That they want to stay there.
일본은
Back then,
비싸니까.
because in Japan the labor was very expensive, and back then making kimono and they have to dye it, and there's a way to dye the silk in a particular way. If you tie thread around the silk, and there is a special way of dyeing the cloth, the silk, because the labor was very expensive then. So the Japanese, they would come to Korea and they would do that. So these two sisters, they were very professional at it.
다 홀치고 하는데 그 손톱으로 하는데 그걸
They were doing this this particular way of dyeing their silk, and they were really professional. They were really professionals.
그래서 이제 방을 얻으자 종일
So I found a room for them, and all day long they would work. In the evening they would come and hear the word, so they would barely sleep.
그래가지고 그 자매들이
So that those sisters,
돈을 가지고 자기는 라면 먹고
though they made a lot of money, but they were just eating noodles, but they supported us to do the work of the gospel.
내가 다 할머니가
So even nowadays, those two sisters became grandmas, and one of them is going to Sonsan Church. I'm not seeing the other sister yet very often these days.
그때 제가 생각해보면
But anyway, when I think about all that,
젊은 아가씨들이
the young ladies in their 16, 18 years old, their love for Christ was so big.
정말 아직 철이 없는 나이들
They were still young, but back then my wife,
서울에 이제 친정에 잠깐 보리로 갔는데
I had something to do in Seoul, so I went there. And the sisters, they came to see me, and they prepared kimchi.
조만한 한쪽은 썩어가고 한쪽은
And one side of it,
그렇게 살아가고 그래.
it was alive, but one side of it was very fresh. One side of it was all salted. So when I shared that story with my wife, and she laughed, 'cause usually they have to So they have to keep it in the salty waters
그래도
to make it, kind of let go of the air.
아무도
But I was very thankful anyway because there was no one helping me but those sisters. I don't know what they thought about, but they just came like that and they heard the word and they began to support us preaching the gospel and they were very happy. So we were able to preach the word.
그렇게 시작이 됐어요.
So that's how we began. So the young student, they got saved, and some brothers, they got saved. So there was this brother named Chesingman, he got saved. So the brother got saved too. The mother got saved. Actually, the mother was very superstitious. She went through a lot of superstition. But one day the Chesingman, he came and he got saved.
그래가지고 이제 어느 날 점을 치니까
And they did some kind of divination thing
예수 교회 나가기 때문에
because
죽는다 하는 그 이야기를 들었어요.
they heard things like, because the son was going to the Christianity church,
얘들아, 엄마
they were gonna die or something. So I heard that if I die, if you keep on believing in Jesus, I'll die. The fortune tellers say.
아무 대답을 안 해.
So don't go to church. I don't care if I die, but if I die, who will take care of you?
싸웠어요.
So,
그래서
but the son didn't answer.
자꾸 못 가게 막고 또 뭐 변소간다고 나오고 막 그러면 또 동생들이 엄마 저 변소가 나 교회 갔어요. 막 그 이야기를 하는 거예요.
So in secret he went to church. So one day I visited their house. When I do the work of the gospel, there always something like that happens.
누워 있다가 내가 가니까 방에
So when I went there,
쳐다보고 누워 있어.
the mother was sitting looking to the wall.
바로 세워 놓지 못해. 눕혀는 손대만 목신이 노한다.
They couldn't touch anything there because she was believing a lot of superstition in the family. They wouldn't let us touch the closet because it was lying on the floor, but they were afraid that the god of the wood may be angry.
야 이놈 자식아, 누가 저런 인간 우리 집에 불러들이라 그랬다.
So when I went there, the mother said, "Who told you to bring such a person like to this house?" So that evening, the father came.
아버지가 왔는데 엄마가 아들한테 저 일러가지고 매를 실컷 맞게 하려고.
So the mother wanted her to be beaten up so bad by the father, so told the father, he told on the son, I told him not to go to church because if he go to church, I may die.
여보 우리 그러지 말고 예수 믿자. 나 그 목신 진절머리만.
But then the father said, I'm sick of that god of the wood or something like that.
노한다고.
Why don't we believe in God?
안 그래 좁은 방에 조만.
In the small room, they couldn't do anything because they were afraid of all this superstition. So then, when the father said that, then the father said that the all other kids said, "Oh, that's good. Let's do this." So that's how the mother came to the church and got saved. And that evening, she slept and she had a dream.
방바닥에서 큰 고양이가 나오더니
There came a big serpent from the floor, and the serpent went out and said, "I'm not going to stay in this house anymore."
나가야지.
And the small serpent, they went out too and said, "Oh, the boys is out, so we should go out too." So from then on, all this disease went,
옛날에 그 신을 섬기는 그에 대한 예수님도 그렇게 직성으로
and in serving in Jesus, they were maybe because they were serving all this God or superstition, but they were also serving God with all their hearts. And as we do this work of the gospel, there are always these problems and difficulties and persecutions.
살아 계시는 왜 구원받은 형제들 시련 없이 하면 안 되나?
But Jesus is alive. Why do we have to go through all these difficulties and problems? People may say this, but actually we need difficulties and problems. We can trust in God in difficulties and in problems, and that's a very thankful work.
그래서
That's a very thankful thing. So in Christianity, we have more works in persecutions. Without persecutions, we have less work.
아무 근거 없이 다
Even in our church, there are people who are persecuting us without any
형제하면 너무너무 행복해하는 거야.
without any
또 그러면서 구원받은 역사 일어나고
evidence. So we're very grateful that God is working through us. And last year, because of COVID, there are people out there who are suffering, and especially those who were running their own business, they were going through difficulties because things were not working out well. So they were going through a lot of difficulties. But there are many people getting saved. So all this mission work that we could not do for the past decades, but last year we were able to do all that. So just like that, when I see how people they are coming back to the gospel, I'm so thankful. It's not difficult at all for Jesus to get rid of the persecutions. And Jesus doesn't just let us go through difficulties. Yeah, but we needed difficulties and problems so that we would be able to grow in faith. There was a sister who got saved in our church when I was in Daejeon. Her husband was a soldier, and she was very much against her going to the church. And when I came back from church after the conference in the United States, I heard the news about her was very spread on the church that the husband got saved. How did he get saved? The boss of the husband in the army really was good at palm reading, and he read his palm and said, "Wow!" He was very surprised, and everybody said, "Why? You have such a good wife. Even if your mother abandons you, your wife will never abandon you. Your wife is like the best wife. You shouldn't do anything, but if you just listen to your wife, and everything you will succeed in everything." When you heard that, although they fight and quarrel every day, but she would not just go out. She would not just abandon him. So he was very excited. He was kind of drunk then, and he went to see his wife, and he went to the church. And although he was drunk, but he got saved. When I came there, the church was full of his brother's news. Oh, that sister was persecuted and mistreated by her husband a lot. But now that the brother got saved and they were going to church together, the couple was very happy. So once, before that brother being saved, we had to go to Wonju, and we had our breakfast, and we were on our way to Wonju, Gangneung. But on the car I saw the footmark, and it was kind of on my way. Before coming from Wonju, it was okay, but why? What happened? Oh, but Pastor, in our church, there's no one who can kick your car. And I went to Gangneung, and I came late, and I saw the brothers. I told the brothers, in Wonju, when I went to Wonju, I had my car parked, but somebody kicked on my car. And the brother said, "Oh, Pastor, that's not that. But before you go there, maybe last night, the sister's husband came and caused all this fuss. Maybe that's why. To have it repaired, it will cost us at least maybe 1 million won. Maybe we should probably ask him to pay for it, or just it's okay. You leave it. 1 million is good, but let us receive the reward from God." So that brother got saved afterwards, and somebody kicked on my car in the city then, and through that, one brother got saved too. So when I saw the brother was kind of drunk.
가만히 보니까
So when I saw the car,
좋은 차로 돈이 뭐 약간
it was a good, but I thought it would be just okay. So I asked him if he had this driver's license, and he showed me. And he was kind of drunk, so I told him to just go.
운전하는 편인데 시켰거든요.
So I told the brother who was driving to preach the gospel to him, and he got saved. He preached the gospel to him, and he got saved. And he was they invited him to the
잘 나오고 하면서
Jamshi Indoor Stadium, and he came there.
뭐 자동차
And even until now, he got saved, and he's still coming to our church. Now, if it's true, maybe to have the refund, he may have maybe 1 million, 2 million won, but getting salvation of one soul, it's not comparable, right? And as we live our lives, there are problems time to time.
하나님께 보상받는 거.
But each time, instead of trying to have our refund
하나님께 보상
by ourselves, refund from people, if we could get your refund from God, that's even better.
그냥 우리가 수리하자 하고 놨는데
I didn't try to get the refund from anyone, but when I saw how God gave me the refund and reward through that, I was very thankful. And as we live in Christ,
시련이 있어도 그냥 시련이 있는 게 아니고
things may happen, but it's not just happening.
보디발이 지금 종살이로
But Joseph,
종살 얼마나 비참했겠어.
his life must have been so miserable in his eyes. He was also firstly accused by Potiphar's wife.
그게 그냥 시련이고 괴로움이 아니라
But that's not just a difficulty or suffering,
애국 사람들 다
but
살리고
he saved all the people of Egypt, and saved these people who were in the land of Canaan. It was a plan of God to save them.
그때 요셉이 알았겠습니까? 감옥에 있을
Then did Joseph know what was going to happen then? No.
때 꿈을 꾸면
Oh God, I believe you. But when I had a dream,
해와 별이 나한테 절을 하고
the suns and moons and all the bundles of the 11 bundles of my brothers, they bow down before me. So what does this mean, God? He might have thought so. But we don't have any record of Joseph then, whether he was happy or not happy or anything.
나중에 형님들이
But later, anyway,
벌벌 떠는데
when the brothers came to realize that it was Joseph, they began to tremble, and they were so afraid. And Joseph said, "Don't be afraid.
나를 이곳에 본 당신이잖아. 형님.
Who sent me? He who sent me here is not you, but it's God. God made me into a head of in the house of the Pharaoh. So don't be afraid."
그 고난 좀 당했지만 그
So it's true they went through these difficulties, but the value is so great.
애굽의 총리가 돼가지고 그래가지고
He
총리
became the governor of Egypt, and if you could become the governor like that, then everyone would become governor, right?
그냥 몰라 핍박당 시련 다는 같지만
So it seems like we're just going through those problems because of difficulties, but there always is a reward from God in the persecutions that we Christians we go through.
가서 이제 화학 시간에 들어가
So one day my daughter joined chemistry class, but the student who had class before them, they kept the
알코올 램프 안 보이나 안 끄고 그냥
alcohol lamp,
쉬는 시간 마치 화학
and they left the science lab without actually turning the alcohol lamp off. But
몰랐는데
because of that, because they kept the fire on, the sulfur acid which was being boiled on the alcohol lamp, it kind of exploded, and the acid fell upon my daughter's head.
수술을 다 마쳤는데 학교 측에서 알고 교장선생님 저를 불러서 갔어요.
And my wife, they had to operate her head,
교장선생님 날 보고
but the principal of the school said that this is the 100% responsibility of the school, so we'll be in charge of all the
학교 측에서 돈 뭐 받으면
everything that costs you to have your daughter treated.
그날도 하나님께 치료를
But that time too, I wanted to receive my reward from God.
나는 하나님을 믿는 사람.
So I said, I'm a believer of God.
그때 그 반에 옛날에 한 반에 70명
Back then, there were about 70 students in one class. But why is it my daughter of all students?
나는
So
그 교장선생님 고맙습니다만
I told the school principal that, I thank you for your kindness, but I don't need it because I want to get my reward from God. And I came out.
우리 딸이 그 이제 머리를 수술했는데 그다 긁은 수술했는데
So my daughter had to
다음에 이제 등교하는
have her head operated,
그때 제가
but because she was going to school on public bus, but so I decided to give her a ride every morning to let her go to school. So I'd go there. I gave her a ride early in the morning every day
머리 상할 것 같아서.
because I was afraid that she may get hurt.
딸하고
And
같이
as
함께 살지만
although I was living in the house with her, but it was not easy to talk about the spiritual life. But when as I talked to her, I realized that her salvation was not very clear. So from that day on, as I began to preach the gospel
어떨 때는
to her,
학교 앞에 차를
I was able. She began to preach the gospel. Sometimes I would keep the car parked, and I would preach the gospel. So that's how my daughter got saved when she was in the elementary school, when she was in the middle school. And after her salvation, she changed so much.
딸이 구원받고 우리 아들
After her salvation, my son's salvation, when I see how they changed,
그렇게 감사해요.
I was very thankful.
우리 손녀가 작년에
My daughter-in-law
대통령한테
last year, she got this gift present from President Donald Trump.
하는 말이
I asked her, how did you receive this? How did you receive this prize?
무슨 말씀을
Then my daughter said, my father does exactly as is told from his father. I mean, my grandfather. So my grandfather,
너도 열심히 공부하면
he told me that I should study hard. If I study hard, then I'll be able to do just like your father, he said. So I just did it exactly as my father, and I got saved, and I was able to get this prize from President Trump. So when I see how they follow their mother and their father, they do exactly as they're told. So this really educate them well.
물론 아들이 미국 가서 처음에
Of course, when they first went to United States, things were not easy. There were certain things that were hard. That was hard.
다쳐가지고
When they first went, there was a lot of hardship in our church too.
이제 군대에 가서 한 번은 이제 막 어려운 일을 겪어가지고 막
And once we were in the military, we went through a lot of difficulties too. So
너무 감사한 거예요.
there were difficult things, but I was very thankful
입대할 때
because when my son went to military,
영국이 나이가 많은 군대 가는데 좀 손을 써야 안 하겠냐고.
there were some people who said, "Oh, your son is going to army, at this age, and he's kind of old now. Isn't it better to let him go to, to the rear base? Maybe don't you have to use some connection?"
특전사만 안 가도 좋겠다.
But I told him not to do that. And my son didn't want to join the special force, but he was recruited by the special force.
그 기수 가운데 이번 시험을 1등한 아이
The
특전사
chief commander of the special force told the chief of the training base to
이제 그 특전사령관
look for him some secretary who can speak English from the class who are being trained. That's my son got selected as the secretary of the chief of commander of the special force. But when he got into the base as the lowest ranked soldier, it was one Saturday. There was nobody in the office, but one of his boss came in and came into the chief commander's office and used the phone to call his girlfriend in Japan.
누구에 전화해서 가냐 제가 안 해.
And he was caught in the telecommunication security. And the chief commander, when he came back, he said, "Who talked to his girlfriend in Japan in English?" And the people in the office, they said it's only Younguk Park can speak English. So he called Younguk Park and he asked him. He said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "I didn't do it." So because they thought he was lying, so they told him to go to jail. And the following day was supposed to go to jail, but one of the officer who was in the office, he said that your father is a pastor, right? Yes, you're a pastor. Can you take the oath in your father's name that you didn't do it? Then when the officer went into the secretary's office and asked other soldiers, "Did you see him calling his girlfriend?" "No, we didn't see him. We didn't see him." "So then why did you say that it was him?" Then he went into the office and said, "Oh, Chief Commander, actually there's no one who saw him do that."
그래가지고
Then why they said it was him?
장관을 열에
So that day, my son Young, he was not sent to jail.
정말 기도를 하나님의 풀에 너무너무 감사해요.
So he prayed to God, and God heard his prayers. I was very thankful.
제가 한번 부대에
So since then, we went to the base, and time to time he came
감사한 것은
to see us in our church. What I'm thankful about
시련도 있고 어려움이 있는데
is that it's true, we have difficulties, we have problems, but God always turns it into a blessing.
어려움을 하는
God doesn't give us meaningless difficulties.
그래서 우리가 그리스도인으로서
So as a Christian,
시련에 나간다고 그냥 죄송합니다.
I'm sorry,
그냥 시련이 다가가는 게 아니고
we're not just having these difficulties,
안에
but because we're always in the hand of God,
복을 내리고
God bestows His grace upon us. We can see that.
저도 학곡동이나
Myself too, when I was in Akwokdong and Changpali,
많았지만
when I was in the military, it was true there were difficulties, there were problems,
많을 때 그렇지만 하나님이 항상 같이 계셔서
but God was always with me.
그 어려움 이겨날 때마다 믿음이 자라고
And each time I could see how our faith grew, and we were so blessed.
그리스도인들이 시련을 당하면 너무 두려워하고
So Christians, as a Christian, you shouldn't be just afraid whenever you face difficulties, but we should boldly serve God, and those difficulties will let us grow in faith and make us be more blessed.
하나님 그냥 내버리지 않고 역사하셨고
Just as when Paul went to the prison in Philippi, God didn't abandon him, but he was with God, and God was with him. So we shouldn't rely on our humanistic method, but when we rely on God, there might be problems, there might be difficulties, but God will turn everything into a blessing and make us live a blessed life, I believe.
사도행전에 나오는 역사
The work that happens in the book of Acts, just like in our days today, we have all these problems, but God always turns everything into a blessing. So don't be afraid.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next time again. Take care. Bye bye.